Clemson Sports Talk with Lawton Swan.
Ready, set.
Just call me Swanee.
Tiger style. Tiger style.
Finally, Clemson Sports Talk has come back to Drive Time. Hello, everybody. Lawton Swan back in the saddle. Once again, it is the show that shakes the Southland. Clemson Sports Talk for you each and every afternoon as you make your way around the great state of South Carolina and beyond, listening to us on incredible radio stations like Fox Sports Radio 1400 in the Midlands, heard around the world on the iHeartRadio application. Lots to get into here today on the program as Clemson prepares to take on Syracuse in Death Valley. High noon, the kickoff between two undefeated teams. We'll get to that one in a minute. But first, Clemson Tom joins us here out the gates on a Friday afternoon. CT, what's up?
Oh, my gosh. It's the longest day of my life, Swanee. Need to get this over with.
Well, look,
to you, though. That means the day's over with.
I mean, if Clemson ends up getting beat tomorrow by Syracuse, that'll feel even longer, won't it?
It won't make my weekend great, but, I mean, it won't be the coolest weekend ever, that's for sure.
Well, you know, the one thing I'll say, and I was asked a question yesterday on a radio show about ranking the teams in the ACC, the top five, and I didn't have Syracuse in the top five. And they are an undefeated team, but really their schedule, the fact that they've played, all but one game at home. I mean, I think there's some key indicators here that not necessarily that they're not a good football team, but that perhaps they're not a top 15 football team. Does that make sense?
I think they're a good club. Yeah, it does. I think they're a good club. I think they're going to throw everything at us if they can, but I don't think they're a true indication of who they are. I don't think so. Yeah, that's probably the best way to say it.
Clemson would have to do a lot of negative things, I would say, right?
Yes,
in order for the Tigers to be beat tomorrow.
Yeah, for us to lose this, I feel like we got to do something. Somehow we got to mess this up.
Tom, you had a chance to go over to Tallahassee on Saturday, and certainly watching a game in person versus maybe being on TV or whatever can give you a different feeling. How did you feel about the way that game went and the fact that Florida State had an onside kick late in the game that could have potentially given them a couple of shots to win the game?
Yeah, you know what? I loved it as soon as we opened up the offense. I didn't like how we started off. Excuse me. But it was a weird feeling. They all left at halftime. The fans left at halftime. Our players left in the third quarter. So a lot of people left early is what it looks like. But we just got to keep our foot on the pedal, man. The D-line was a little bit lackluster, in my opinion. DJ opened it up. I wish his old teammate Bo would have got some more looks, but I mean, he's been dropping them since they hit him in the hand sometimes. So it's like, I don't really blame him. Tight ends got in there really well. I thought Shipley played really good. I was honestly a little bit disappointed in the D-line. It was, I don't feel like they showed up for the game, but we got the W. It was fun watching the wave of Garnet and Gold leave at halftime, and that was probably the best part.
He's on Twitter at Clemson Tom. He joins us every Friday to give us the fans' perspective. And so with that, Tom, you brought up the defensive line. I've kind of gone with this theme all year, and I think it's continued. And this will be game 8, right? I mean, this Clemson Tiger team has a chance to be 8-0 tomorrow, and that leaves them 4 regular season games, a potential ACC championship. That's 5. And then you'd get into maybe 2 games in the college football playoff. So 7 games if they were to run the table, which, again, that's a big stretch. But my question is, at what point along the way, Tom, do you need to see whether it's the defensive line, whether it's the offense, when do you need to see this team playing at a quote-unquote championship level?
When?
Yeah, because I don't think you have, right? Like, I mean,
can
can we both agree that this team does not look like a team that could win the national title?
Yeah, I'll agree with you on that. After watching Georgia play, watching Tennessee get up and beat Bama, watching Ohio State, it's where they look like they're playing in fourth and fifth gear. We look like we barely got out of second. We're finally getting into third gear. We're slowly but surely catching up. We're getting hot at the right time, but we do not look like we could win a national championship right now.
Well, and I think it's funny because if we go back to, say, the 2016 Clemson Tiger team that did win a national title, you could make an argument. They win by 6 at Auburn. Auburn has a couple of Hail Marys at the end to maybe win that game in the first game. They beat Troy 30-24. They beat Troy by 6 in the week 2. They beat Louisville barely hanging on when you had the play where Lamar Jackson hits James Quick and he gets pushed out of bounds. That's a 6-point win. They beat NC State, Tom. I think that game was double overtime, 24-17, something like that.
That was double overtime.
They got past Florida State 37-34. They got beat by Pitt. They got beat by Pitt in mid-November. I mean, you can argue now. I don't remember being on the radio that year and going, well, this team doesn't look like a championship team. I remember thinking the whole time, this team could go on and win the title. They've got the goods because they'd already played in a championship game.
Yep.
So, what has to happen for this team to cross over that threshold like Watson and those guys did, where they go and beat Ohio State 31-0 and then beat Alabama in the title game, with that final drive in Tampa?
I don't know what's going to happen, man. That's been the question of the year. What do we got to do? And in their defense, they're doing everything. Whatever team gets in front of them, they beat them. And it depends on who shows up. I feel like the defensive line will show up tomorrow, but then the passing game won't, or the O-line won't. Like we're never hitting on all cylinders. It's always something is this or something is that, and we're just getting by. But yet we're beating everybody that we're getting in front of, and we're not beating cupcakes here. We're talking this will be our third ranked opponent, a decent ranked opponent. It's like we're beating the 22nd, 23rd, and 24th ranked teams in the country. I mean, we beat Wake Forest, who's legit. NC State's legit, and you got Syracuse, who, is currently undefeated. And people will say, oh, well, they're 12th, or they're this, or they're that, but they're still ranked, and we're still beating them. For some reason, I feel like we just need like a wake up call. We got to get a little bit of just anger going on in us. But sometimes I feel like we look at our stars and we're like, yeah, we're good enough just to beat these guys just barely showing up. And we haven't really been punched in the mouth. We haven't gone back and forth like we've had to. We haven't really had to dig deep. And we haven't really had a gut check time.
I'll be honest.
We kind of had it against Florida State. We kind of did, but not really.
I'm not sure, looking at that schedule in 2016, Tom, that Clemson played like a championship team, like a true – I mean, they beat Virginia Tech in the ACC championship game 42-35. I'm not sure that they felt like a, quote, championship team until they hammered Ohio State. And I think that was, if you think back on that game, 31-0, that was a game where most people thought Ohio State was going to win, and Clemson just came out and dominated them.
Oh, we didn't dominate them, dude. We embarrassed them. I was at that game. And Caitlin and I flew out to Arizona. I just remember because that place was packed. Like I think we even talked about it on the show. There was like 10 or 20% of that stadium was Clemson. Like there were so many people in scarlet and gray leaving, you couldn't see people. You just saw the colors, and it just looked like a flow. It honestly looked like they're on a conveyor belt.
I think that was when they stepped it up.
Beautiful. Yeah, they thought they were going to win.
Well, I know this.
Maybe we got to get tested. Maybe we're just coasting. We just got it on cruise control right now because we know we can. That's what it looks like.
There were some Ohio State fans that somebody I'm friends with was near who were pretty close to that Ohio State program. And when they were on the field before that game, they told them, they said, this Clemson team is the first team we've played all year that looks like they should be on the field with us. And then Clemson went out there and made it look like Ohio State shouldn't have been on the field with Clemson.
You told me that. Yeah, we talked off air about that. I remember you telling me that.
This Clemson Tiger team again comes into the matchup 7-0 tomorrow. Syracuse at 6-0. If Clemson wins it, Tom, they take a stranglehold on the Atlantic Division with like a 98% probability of getting to the ACC championship game. If they lose it, they're going to need some help. Fortunately, Syracuse would still be the team that would be really in their way, and I don't know the Cuse would be able to run the table given their schedule. But, man, hard to believe you could be this early really in the season and sort of cinch up a trip to Charlotte.
Yeah. Got a point.
Life comes at you fast.
It does come at you fast, doesn't it? Man, I'm excited for it, man. Honestly, I want to see us get out there. I want to see us, live up to the hype that what we have. And maybe we're just coasting right now because we know we can. There's no real threat or anything like that. But here pretty soon it's going to be coming up. I think we're going to go to the playoffs, and we're going to get a good team, and we're going to have to man up.
Tom, I was talking with Tim Bray yesterday, and he made a great point. It kind of got me chuckling. But isn't it amazing that, like, the conversations about DJ Uiagalelei have gone from what week will Cade Klubnik take over to is he considered one of the –
We don't even talk about Cade anymore. We don't even talk about Cade.
Yeah, and now is DJ considered one of the comeback players of the year? Is he turning himself into a dark horse Heisman candidate? Isn't it wild how quickly that narrative changed for DJ?
Good. We talked about it. That's what we wanted. We wanted it to be this. We just wanted DJ to actually do something. If not, get out of the way and let the young man step up.
You look at DJ. He's confident now, Tom. The throw he made down 7-0 at Florida State, a flick of the wrist, 59 yards essentially. I mean, just where he is right now is so different than where he was a year ago. And I feel like you could see it in his body language as much as anything, right? Like when he's out there on the field, he looks more confident. I mean, you're a guy in sales. I mean, you've seen this look of guys that aren't confident. I mean, what does that do for a guy to have that in his system at this point?
It's not just sales, and it goes back to sports. I mean, even being out on, the football field, track, wrestling, whatever sport it was, soccer, whatever it was that we played, the guy, if you had a little bit of swagger, you knew it. And it was confidence in your ability. I remember going out there, Tom's just being like, y'all ain't going to mess with us today. Like, we won the coin toss. As soon as we got off the bus, we won the game. We were just meaner. We were better. We looked better. We knew we did. And that's honestly what he looks like. He's got that little bit of a swag now, and I'm digging that. I absolutely love that about him. He's running over guys, juking guys in the end zone, turn around and looking at them. That's good for him. Good for him.
Tom, one other storyline. By the way, Clemson Tom is on Twitter, at Clemson Tom. Go follow him. And by the way, Tom, thanks for retweeting the Rudy Was Offsides t-shirt post we put out, man. I appreciate that.
Oh, you kidding me? It's facts. I'm just retweeting facts here, pal. I'm not trash talking. That's facts.
Yeah, it's a great shirt. I don't know. Did you ever have the original from 2015 or whatever?
Yours?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you gave it to me. Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Well, we'll see if we can't get our hands on another one for you this time around. They held up pretty well. Lowell's, I'm going to tell you this. Lowell's shirt did not hold up well. He wore that thing when he was in college about 4 times a week.
I mean, does he still wear that goofy hat? He wore the hat every day of the week. I'm pretty sure he showered with that hat on.
I don't think so. I don't think he's wearing the hat any longer. That may be a good thing. Some people say, does Tom still carry that goofy belt?
Yeah, it's in my closet. Yeah, it's kind of put up, but yeah, still got it. I don't carry it around like I used to, but yeah, still got it.
You should just take it to the grocery store on your shoulder.
Yeah, it's been in the grocery store on my shoulder before. That thing's been everywhere. Back in the day when I carried it, man. Back in my prime is what they say.
Clemson Tom with us here on a Friday afternoon, getting set for the Tigers matchup against the Syracuse Orange tomorrow noon on ABC. A noon kickoff, Tom, a little different. Clemson's been playing in primetime a lot this year. Does that favor or help Syracuse, or, do you think none of that matters at this point when it comes down to this matchup?
I don't think it matters, man. Honestly, the only way it would matter if it was like an 8 p.m. kickoff, college game day at Syracuse. That might be the only thing. But noon game in Clemson, I think it favors Clemson. We're at home. It's homecoming. We're gonna have the blood pumping. The one thing I am gonna ask you, I don't know if you're gonna get to this or not, but Military Appreciation Day is coming up. Technically, that game is going to be an Orange Britches game. Do we go back to purple and orange?
I don't know.
The real question. That's the real question.
I mean, I would think that you would, if Sweeney seems like a man of principles and discipline, and I mean, if it's a championship game, they've always said they were going to wear orange pants, and if it's a purple out, then don't you have to wear purple on top?
You do, and you got to wear the orange britches on that game. It's a championship. I mean, it is the ugliest, prettiest combo in college football history. That's how ugly it is. It's gorgeous.
Do you know what I said the other day? And I know some Tiger fans think I'm crazy, but I would like Clemson one time a year to go all white. White pants, white shirt, white helmet with an orange paw.
I would love a white helmet with
Storm
an orange paw.
Troopers,
People
baby.
would freak out.
Storm Troopers. And not even an orange paw, but like the metallic orange, like Louisville's helmets and some of those other helmets, when they've got those kind of custom jobs.
What if it's just the outline? What if the outline is just the paw? The orange outline. You know what I mean? So it pops it a little bit. Just the outline of it.
I may have to Photoshop that up, Tom.
Oh, my gosh. You know what I'm talking about? Where it's all white, but you just got the outline of the paw.
Yeah. So it would just be the framing of the paw would be the only thing on the helmet.
Man, or a blackout. What if we did like a blackout?
Call them the Clemson Crispy Whites. Let's go.
We need a blackout with the outline of the orange paw.
Oh, my gracious.
Not a solid orange paw, but the outline.
That would be a poll question. Blackout versus whiteout. I like the all whites. Listen.
The all white would look clean, man, but that blackout would look tough. Yeah. I mean, that's intimidation right there.
I know.
Night game too.
Yeah, right. Well, I know how you feel about South Carolina, Tom. It's not good, but you can't.
But I love the state of South Carolina. It's beautiful.
I meant the Gamecocks. You can't deny this.
Oh, I forgot all about them.
When they were good, which has been a while. But when they were really good and they wore the all white uniforms with Clowney and them were there, that's a bad looking look, dude. That is a bad looking look. Like a good.
It was,
bad,
man. It's too bad that they were only that good for like 5 years, man. That's what's too bad about it. They could only the swagger lasted 5 years. That's what's so bad. I forgot they existed, man. They still got a team down there?
Yeah, they're playing A&M this weekend.
Oh, you see Texas A&M tweeted out that that's their that is the biggest rivalry or something like that, or something stupid.
I saw that.
Something that was dumb, and I was like, "Are you guys kidding me? That's no, sorry." But they're trying to make that happen, and the reason why they don't like the Gamecocks is they did their midnight yell their first game in Columbia. They did the midnight yell at the Capitol, and the Gamecock fans just were Gamecock fans and just made jerks of themselves, yelling, throwing stuff at the midnight yell. And I'm like, that's their tradition. You might not have to like it, but that's their tradition, And they were throwing stuff at the Aggies, and it was bad. That's why they don't like them. But I mean, every Gamecock that I talk to doesn't like Texas A&M either. So, but the Aggies are going to just destroy them. I don't think anything's going to be close.
Clemson Tom's on Twitter at Clemson Tom. Tom, buddy, have a great weekend, man. We'll talk to you next week. Thanks.
Absolutely. Have a good one. Go Tigers.
Go Tigers indeed. 803-450-0086. Don't forget hour number 2, Tommy Bowden, former Clemson Tiger head coach, joins the program as we roll along on Fox Sports Radio 1400 in the Midlands, heard around the world on the iHeartRadio app. Clemson Sports Talk on a Friday afternoon. Tommy Bowden coming up in hour 2. Clemson Tom, just a little bit ago, we were talking about uniform combinations. And again, there is that potential that Clemson could be playing for a shot to go to the ACC championship. And in doing so, would put themselves in a potential situation of where it's a purple out and they are wearing orange breeches. And we've seen these uniform combinations before during the time when Tommy Bowden was coaching Clemson. By the way, Coach Bowden again coming up in hour 2. But when you think about the way that Dabo Swinney sort of structured this deal, I guess this has been a potential thing that could take place during a purple out. But I want to go back to what we were saying about the all-white uniforms for a minute, because I brought it up earlier this week, maybe late last week, and I get it. Like, there are a lot of you that don't like that thought. Okay? But in this day and age, I know that there is tradition. Like, I understand the concept of tradition. Okay? I'm not going to try to come at you with, well, tradition's not important. I know how important it is. But I can also be open-minded enough to believe that in a off, what would you call it, like a one-off uniform is not going to completely derail anything. And I'll bring you this point. If you were okay, and maybe not even okay, maybe you absolutely hated when Clemson wore those throwback uniforms to the 1939 team. They did that twice while I was in college. I mean, if you thought, man, that's pretty neat to see those, or you hated them, or however you felt about them, right? You survived. I'm not condoning or being a proponent for forever Clemson's helmet should be changed. But I would not be against, just like I don't, the all purple for the purple out, I would not be against one game a year, all white uniforms. White from head to toe. And I like what Tom said. I actually threw it in the Google machine. Clemson white helmet. And there's a nice one with a tiger paw that's white. So all you see is sort of the outline of the paw. I'd rather them be custom helmets, not a sticker. Custom made, like the Nature Boy Ric Flair. You know what I'm talking about. Custom made from head to toe.
And I'm saying, woo, right here.
Indeed. I could do that once a year. Road game. You already, and here's the thing. You already wear all white with an orange helmet on the road. Switching that helmet once a season is not going to take away from Clemson's branding. I mean, for crying out loud, if you could wear those hideous 1939 uniforms or the small paws. Remember when Clemson went to the smaller paw? I mean, you survive that. Don't, whatever you do, don't go look at the smaller paw helmet. You will not like it. But an all-white road uniform, I'd be in favor of. Matter of fact, I would push it. I am banned the woohoo. I see these college kids doing this goofy paw, this little paw hand claw thing or whatever they do where they bend their fingers over. You look ridiculous. Stop. Just stop right now. That is ridiculous. But all whites once a year on the road for like what you would deem to be your biggest conference game? Yeah. I'd be all for it. 803-450-0086, because the business uniforms that we call the ones they wear now, that's cool. But I'm telling you, man, if you could wear the Icy Whites, Stormtroopers, woo. Now, I don't agree with Tom about the black uniforms or whatever, like a blackout. I don't see myself ever getting behind. I will say, though, the softball program, Clemson softball program, has those smoky gray uniforms. And I'm not saying I would like to see Clemson football in smoky gray. I'm not. But every other sport at Clemson, baseball included, basketball, they should all have that smoky dark gray uniform. That looks good on orange. I got Clemson Sports Talk. I talked about the Rudy was offsides t-shirt. By the way, they're still over on their website and up for sale. ClemsonSportsTalk.com. $20. That includes your shipping. But we've got like some dark gray Clemson Sports Talk, the national championship shirts. And that's my favorite. I like it better than the purple. I like it better than the dark purple. I like the gray, personally. Don't forget, coming up in hour 2, we'll be joined by Tommy Bowden. I know it's already been a rough week in the world of college football for the folks at Mississippi State with the death of Sam Westmoreland, who was a football player on the team. Well, today I saw that a San Jose State football player, Camden McWright, died earlier today in a traffic crash when he was hit by a school bus while riding his electric scooter. He was 18 years old. I was looking to see if there was any indication as to whether San Jose State would play their game tomorrow against New Mexico State. I don't see anything that says they won't. Of course, Mississippi State, which we mentioned earlier, playing Alabama, but thoughts and prayers go out to both of these programs after losing players here this past week. With a break, stay with us. Rocking and rolling along with you on a Friday afternoon, a football Friday for all you high school football fans out there. And speaking of high school football, our very own Luke Winstel joins us here on the program. Follow him on Twitter at Luke Winstel, WINSTEL. And he's on the road tonight over in the state of Georgia. He covers recruiting for us over on the website. So, Luke, where are you headed tonight, man? What game you checking out?
Well, tonight's an exciting. I've got Brookwood at Grayson in Atlanta, and that game is always a big one. It's 7A, highest level of competition in Georgia football, but especially big tonight because it's our Hall of Fame game. Think similar to the way you have a Hall of Fame in the NFL, the Hall of Fame game where the inductees go to that preseason game and eventually go through that induction process after. We've got, in Georgia, a new thing this year, the Georgia High School Football Hall of Fame. So there will be all kinds of big names. Herschel Walker, one of them that is going to be around this weekend, and they've got their induction tomorrow. And tonight's the Hall of Fame game where they'll all be honored pregame, and we'll get to see some big names. So an even bigger game than it might be in terms of just the normal Brookwood-Grayson matchup, but two very, very talented teams here tonight live.
Luke Winstel joining us here on the program. So, Luke, I want to start. I know you were in Knoxville last weekend for that matchup between Tennessee and Alabama. Just give us a bit of insight into what you think of both of those teams at this point, and then ultimately some insight into that environment.
That was definitely the wildest environment I've been a part of. The funny thing, I gauge noise off of, do my ears feel like they're going to fall off? Because you get these big environments, you get to games like Clemson and games up there in Knoxville, Athens, and the Southeast. You say, okay, these are great environments. And Clemson, a couple of weeks ago during the night game, really, had that loud crowd. But Neyland was one that a lot of the photographers on the sideline were wearing earplugs because it was just that loud. I decided not to. I really wanted to feel it and feel that energy. Might have been a regret. My ears hurt for 2 or 3 days after. It really was that loud between the music that's pumped in and the fans going crazy. But, that game, you look at Alabama, they're a good team, but the defense, looked like it had trouble communicating. It didn't feel like it was nearly the pass rush that we were used to from Dallas Turner, Will Anderson, and company. And Tennessee was able to take advantage. They got out early, pinned their ears back on defense. Their pass rush was able to get to Bryce Young a little bit here and there. And eventually Tennessee, with that offense, just seems as explosive as they come. For me, covering recruiting, that was as big of a weekend as you tend to see, really, on the trail of having close to 100 prospects in the building to see that kind of action and have that kind of emotion. But one thing I'm excited about this weekend, Lawton, we've got another big recruiting weekend over at Clemson, seeing what the Tigers have, a lot of dynamic players coming in and a few players that I really could see end up getting and joining that 23 class.
Yeah, when I think about what you mentioned, looking back at Alabama real quick, Luke, I just, this season, as good as they've been, I think I would put them in kind of an underwhelming category, maybe even similar to what we've seen from Clemson, right? Like if Alabama was undefeated right now at 7-0 and they had won that game 52-49, I'd be sitting there saying, man, they barely got by Tennessee. They barely escaped Texas A&M. Texas probably beats them if Quinn Ewers is playing. I mean, I think Alabama's got some of the same issues that Clemson has in that they haven't looked like a championship team. Is Alabama going to get back to the college football playoff?
It's a murderer's row of a schedule for sure. I mean, the game I circle is Ole Miss. I think, Josh Pate talks about this wounded animal mode. I like to adapt that terminology that Alabama's in right now of you lost one, you lose a second. The way the SEC is going and the way things are going now, they just cannot afford to lose. They won't be able to sneak into a 14 playoff with 2 losses, obviously. So with Alabama, I don't worry about them with Mississippi State coming off a loss. It seems like Alabama, especially in my lifetime, has been the type of team that rebounds very well from a loss, especially a frustrating, maybe you call it heartbreaking type loss as well. So I feel good about their chances bouncing back there. I feel like a couple of weeks from now against LSU, Bama is a multi-touchdown favorite in my eyes. I don't worry about that. I do think Ole Miss is the one, and this is a popular one for people to circle. That matchup, Saban-Kiffin, is always interesting, but that's the one that I look at. I don't think Alabama's in the danger of really falling out of the playoff at this point. I think Bryce Young, by that time, should be healthier, and their defense overall has all the talent they need. They've got to pull themselves together after Tennessee exposed a lot of weaknesses for really the second week in a row. I thought Alabama's defensive backfield did not look the way that I assumed they would, especially for a team that brought in transfers in that area. It just didn't seem like the strong point that I thought it might have been.
Final thing, I mean, if you had to make a prediction on these SEC teams, Tennessee, Georgia, Alabama, a lot of people are saying, hey, all 3 should be in if they have that, 1-loss deal for across the board. I mean, what do you think? How do you think it all plays out?
Well, I think, I know people love to dream like that, especially down here in the South. What if we get 3 SEC teams? I just don't think that the winner of Ohio State, Michigan, you're not going to be able to keep them out of it because that's likely a 1-loss or less team. So that's going to be one that gets in. Clemson is going to, as far as I'm concerned, if you ask me to predict, I'd say Clemson's a 1-loss or less team by the time we finish conference championship weekend. I expect Clemson would be the team that does take the ACC. That's the way things are going. I like the trajectory there. And I think if you've got the winner of the Ohio State-Michigan game and they go on to win a conference championship, Clemson wins the conference championship, you're definitely not going to have the 3 as much as people like to dream. If Tennessee, that's the thing that throws a wrench in everything, because preseason we look at a seemingly foregone conclusion of Georgia, Alabama, again, the 2 Titans. But obviously the big thing coming up is that Tennessee-Georgia game. I'll be there checking that one out. And then Alabama-Ole Miss, that, shapes who we see. And once you get to that, I think if I had to project, I'd still go with Georgia to beat Tennessee. I think the matchup favors Georgia. And then I think I'd take them over Tennessee, and then I would take Alabama. So I'm still maybe not as exciting with my prediction there. I think it's gotten exciting, but I'm still sticking with the initial. Georgia-Bama SEC championship. Maybe the loser sneaks in, but I'm just not sure. The loser of the Tennessee-Georgia game, I don't see them in the playoff.
There he is, Luke Winstel. We'll hit a break. We'll come back with more right after this. Stay with us. Final segment of Hour 1 coming up. Tommy Bowden, former Clemson Tiger head coach, joins us. But first, Luke Winstel, lead recruiter for ClemsonSportsTalk.com, out on the scene in Georgia tonight. Going to watch a little high school football. And, Luke, we'll talk about recruiting in a minute. But I want to ask you, as a young guy, a lot of people are against, a lot of people are anti alternate uniforms. They like traditional. I said earlier, I wouldn't mind seeing Clemson in some like an alternate all-white uniform for a road game, even with a white helmet. Some Tiger fans will hate me for that. What do you think as a young guy? I mean, would you be okay if a team like Clemson that's always so traditional went away from that tradition maybe once a season for like an icy white road uniform?
I think that would be a cool gimmick. When you look at some of the uniforms in college football, you get that tradition, and I understand it, but I think you have some real memories where you look at certain games in the past where you say, oh, that school, had a really cool alternate uniform, won this big game, that kind of thing. So I think it would be cool. I'm someone that, while I respect the tradition, if it's once a year, maybe not more than twice a year, I think that's really cool to have a little creativity, see what you got, and maybe, you bring that uniform and have some recruits do photo shoots with it as well. People like those variations. I think that could be really cool, especially for the younger generation, kind of show off a bit of style on top of what you normally have.
I like it. Going with the benefit of the recruits. And even if, again, because for Clemson, I don't want to touch home uniforms, but you could always have those icy whites for those recruits when they get in town, which is still a uniform in your wheelhouse. Clemson currently with the standard, although, Luke, you may not know this, when Clemson has their purple out later this season, anytime they're playing for a championship, which would be the ACC at the Atlantic Division Championship, they wear orange pants. So we might get a purple top, orange pants combination, which we haven't seen in a long time in Tiger Town. So we'll see if that happens. All right, let's focus on where your expertise is. Again, he's on Twitter at Luke Winstel, covers recruiting for us all over the state of Georgia, into the state of Alabama. That's where Clemson really dives in deep. Luke, so this weekend, a big weekend, we ran our interview with Khalil Barnes just a couple of days ago out of the state of Georgia, defensive back who was a Wake Forest commit, has since decommitted. What are your thoughts on Barnes and what he could potentially bring to the table?
I feel like if I'm Clemson right now, especially heading into the weekend, I'm more than optimistic about Barnes right now because he's someone that as soon as the decommit happened, Clemson pops him with the offer. They're going at him. And Clemson's really the most notable school right now that's in heavy pursuit of Barnes in terms of, you look at rankings, you look at success, you look at recent championships. Clemson's got the tradition. They're not very far from home for Barnes. It's under an hour and a half away from where he lives over in Bogart near Athens, Georgia. And you take a look at Barnes' skill set, he fits in well with what Clemson does. You talked about on your show, Lawton, about how Clemson feels like he could have the versatility as a Andrew Makuba type. And I've seen it firsthand. The athleticism is there. I look forward to actually going to see and visit him in person in the future as well. But Barnes is one that coming into the weekend you feel optimistic about if the visit goes well, which I tend to expect it will, given Clemson staff and the way that they've structured some things this weekend. I think that Coach Khan working on Khalil is exactly what the Tigers would want, and I think he's one of those prospects that you take on the defensive side to really help round out your class. He's not as highly rated as some other guys coming this weekend, like a Tamarion Parker or Caden McDonald, but he's one that has the athleticism to contribute probably as an underclassman for Clemson. He really is someone that can be developed well, and I think Coach Khan is one that is really interested in Barnes right now.
You brought up Parker. I mean, he's a kid, that 2023 class that Clemson seems pretty hot and heavy about it, that defensive end spot. Give us some insight into what type of player you think he would be at the collegiate level, given what you've seen.
Dominant. I saw him play IMG Academy, and when you have a team like IMG that's a all-star team that somehow gets to play high school football, they go out and they play some of the most talented teams in the country. A lot of them still can't keep up, but you look at Parker, and he came out of the gate in the game that I saw him over in Phoenix City, Alabama. He's just dominating people that you thought, 4-star, highly rated. This will be a great matchup. He's able to come in on the offensive side and make some noise. Defensively, he's disruptive. He's athletic. Some people really like him at that edge spot where he projects in college. And he's one of those, he walks by you on the sideline, hey, that's got to be somebody. And he just has the body, the physique. I like the aggressiveness. And with Parker, we saw last weekend he was up in Tennessee. So that was one of those visits that can really shift momentum for a prospect because of the moment, the memory, whether he goes there, whether he even ever considers Tennessee, he'll never forget that game. So Tennessee's jumped up in the picture for him. He gave some reporters a few interviews throughout the week where he gave a glowing review of Tennessee and what he thought of that program. So they're a team that might be climbing in, but Clemson to me just has been the favorite for months now. This weekend's an official visit for Parker. So Clemson really getting the shot to wine and dine him, get to show him, really what Death Valley is like.
Well, Luke, man, enjoy that game tonight, and certainly appreciate everything you do, keeping everybody updated. And the article, a deeper dive into this weekend's recruiting visit list, is up over on our website right now. Luke, thanks, buddy. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you for having me on.
There you go. Follow him on Twitter at Luke Winstel, Winstel. We go from the state of Georgia to the state of Florida, where former Clemson Tiger head coach Tommy Bowden joins us right here on the program next. We'll get his thoughts on Clemson and Florida State. That's always a unique matchup for Coach Bowden, given his father's tenure there at Florida State. And we'll find out some of his thoughts on where he thinks DJ Uiagalelei is right now between his ears. Stay with us for more of the show that shakes the Southland.
It's time for Clemson Sports Talk with Lawton Swan.
Ready, set.
Just call me Swanee.
Tigers time. Tigers time.
It is hour number 2. That's drive time right here on the show that shakes the Southland, Clemson Sports Talk. Fox Sports Radio, 1400 millions around the world on the iHeartRadio app. My buddy, Clemson Tom, was on the program in hour number 1. Now, Tommy Bowden, former Clemson Tiger head coach. I feel like he's a buddy. He's been a part of this show since literally it went on the air like a decade ago. We were both younger, probably better looking. But here we are, again, talking about a Clemson Tiger team that is 7-0, entertaining Syracuse, who's 6-0 in Death Valley tomorrow at noon. Coach, welcome in, and thank you for being a part of the program on a Friday.
Yeah, it really does. As I was looking at some of the stats from Syracuse, the guys leading the ACC, and I think total defense and scoring defense. And then, of course, with Clemson being able to score points right now, that should be exciting. You normally don't think of Syracuse, if anything. They've had more offensive history than defensive history. And, of course, you got Clemson. I'm sure their defense coordinator is going to challenge them about how good Syracuse's defense is. It should be a heck of a game. It really should. I think Clemson's going to be way too talented, but I think it's got the makings of a good game anyway.
What's interesting, I guess you would say a little bit, is how through the years, depending on kind of where your program is, the style or the mindset of who you are maybe shifts. And one of the things that Syracuse has defensively, they're fairly small across the board. They're not, they don't have a 300-pounder on that defensive line. I mean, they're fairly small. They work more of a speed type game, I think, defensively. And of course, with the way offenses are geared in this day and age, there's nothing wrong with that. But it almost feels like I can remember, Clemson teams where that kind of had to be the thing because you couldn't get those big uglies up front defensively. So you kind of, I guess, play to the talent that you have. I mean, is that kind of how this works?
Now I remember William Perry and the day on Chester McLaughlin. Don't be talking too much about the big defensive guys we had to go against in the past from Clemson. But true. You're right. And I think that you talk a lot about coaching. And they are small. They are undersized. Now, how should a team like that, they won't be nearly talented as Clemson, probably Virginia Tech, Miami, North Carolina, but all of a sudden be leading. And I think that obviously it reflects on coaching. A lot of times we talk about, coaching and guys doing great jobs. There's a defense coordinator. I've seen pictures of him. I know what he looks like. I don't know anything about his background, but for him to take that talent level and to have the results that he's having, and like you said, he's got younger guys, so they probably move a lot, slant, stunt, twist, and tries to outnumber you. You have to do things like that. So that's a direct reflection, as you kind of alluded to, the ability to put your players in a position to be successful. And he's really, really done that with those undersized guys.
Yeah, it's been interesting to watch their development. The strange thing is the scheduling. I mean, Clemson's done with ACC road games, and this is Syracuse's first road game in the league. I know this is the first time in 81 years of Death Valley that two teams are 6-0 or better and undefeated playing in a game. I got to imagine this might be the first time in the history of the ACC that one team is done with their road trips and the other team is just making their first. And you know all about how difficult it can be to go on the road. So, with their only road game being at UConn, I mean, how tough do you think the environment will be for the Orange on Saturday? Even though, again, it's a noon kickoff, but still, I mean, it's going to be a relatively hostile noon kickoff, I would imagine.
It will, and there could possibly be some communication problems early for Syracuse. And if it's a close game, then of course, if the crowd's into it, then there's going to be possibility of communication later. But the one thing that a lot of people don't realize, those places, Syracuse, they're probably used to playing in front of 30,000. Connecticut, they probably went up there and played in front of maybe 20-some thousand. And the last against NC State, I think they played up at Syracuse. They might have had a little bit larger crowd. But their Syracuse's players will be, when they walk in that stadium and see 80, there might be 86 packed in there. I don't know.
Right.
But they're gonna say, man, this is what it's like, and it really it elevates their enthusiasm a little bit more, as opposed to you would think it'd be a negative. Now, like I said, there will be probably some communication problems, but those players at Syracuse, now them probably offered at a place like Clemson. But when they walk in there, I think they will really be excited and emotional about playing. I don't think it'll help them that much, but instead of an intimidating factor, I think it's more of a motivating factor, because they're fixing to get a taste of what a real college environment is.
Former Clemson Tiger head coach Tommy Bowden hanging out with us here today. So, Coach, I'll ask you a similar question to the one I asked Dabo Swinney after the game on Saturday. Of course, Clemson takes control against Florida State, but then a couple of late touchdowns. And, I said to him, the thing you and I talk about quite a bit is how he's leveled off, no matter who Clemson's playing, it's not this up and down. They're pretty steady. But how do you kind of regain control of that in a game when you feel it? Because, like, as an athlete, I played sports, you played sports, you know how it is. You get up, you start to get comfortable, you might get a little lackadaisical in some things, and then these are players fighting to win a game on the other sideline. And then all of a sudden, it's a tight ball game. So how difficult is it as a coach, in your opinion, to sort of turn that momentum in game more so than just being prepared every week?
Well, the one thing you have to be careful from when you're so anxious for, And there's some pressure for younger guys to play. You don't want to lose a guy to transfer portal. He's coming to see you in his office, and he wants more playing time. And all of a sudden, you might get a 2-touchdown lead, 17-point lead or so against Florida State. So you start maybe subbing a guy that necessarily wouldn't be in, and then all of a sudden you lose a little continuity in your offense or defense. And all of a sudden you lose the continuity and you lose the momentum. And all of a sudden, Florida State puts a couple of scores up there, and all of a sudden, man, you're in a potential fight. So you really have to be careful from a substitution standpoint. And those are things that you just mentioned that you talk about on Friday night. And, man, if we get ahead of them by 2 scores, they have the ability to come back. Don't you dare let up. And so you discuss those things during the course of a game. It's just about too late. You can talk about them if you feel yourself losing control, losing momentum. You can talk about them between series and maybe at halftime or end of the third quarter or whatever. But those are things that are usually addressed Friday night. But sometimes the coaches at fault himself, they start subbing a little bit too early. All coaches, they want to play as many guys as they can, get them experience for on down the season. And all of a sudden, boy, you lose continuity and you lose some of the momentum, and you're fighting for your life.
Tommy Bowden with us here on the program. That's one thing I would say too. Like if I look at Clemson's issues at this point, and there are certainly many to still be undefeated where they are. That's what you want. But like DJ Uyunglele is much improved, but they still haven't had an opportunity to get a whole lot of snaps for Cade Klubnik. And I'm not saying that Cade needs a ton of snaps, but man, if DJ rolls his ankle and you're 8-9 games into the schedule, I think a lot of people thought at this point Cade Klubnik would have been able to, be a little bit more developed, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's the one thing you miss a little bit, getting your second team guy more work. Where in the past, a lot of times with Trevor Lawrence and with Deshaun Watson, they would have substantial leads and the second guy could get in. They haven't been afforded that luxury so far. And that might hurt them if DJ goes down with injury and they have to depend on him to win a game as opposed to finishing a game. That could be an issue. But yeah, they haven't been in that situation as much as I'm sure they would have liked, and that definitely hurts because all that guy more than any position on the field needs at bats in the heat of battle as opposed to practice and scrimmages and things like that. And the only way he can get it usually is what he needs is in a close game, and then where he has the team on his shoulders. But there hadn't been a lot of those situations this year.
The thing that surprised me, I think, most about DJ, and you see it just in the way he kind of carries himself now, Coach, is how quickly he went from looking like a player where when things didn't go his way, you had to really be concerned that he couldn't bounce back, to a player now when things don't go his way where I don't really have concern that he's not going to come out and make a play. Like, I can't believe how much his body language and everything has sort of even transformed my thoughts on what I see from him every Saturday.
I agree with you. Like you said, if last year was an indication, we said, gosh, this is going to be a long year for Clemson. What he needed to do was play better week after week after week. And you'll notice that the head coach, Dabo, never really lost confidence in him. And, of course, you got to do that in the paper so the guy won't lose his confidence. But he knew what he was seeing in practice. He knew how the player was responding after the games and one-on-one quarterback meetings. And sure enough, he's playing like Dabo talked. And early in the year, when you and I first had the first show before the season started, I said, if he throws for 60-some%, and his interceptions are below 5 or so. And right now, if I'm not mistaken, his 6 or 7 game statistics are a little bit ahead of Deshaun and Trevor Lawrence.
Yes.
So he has answered the bell. That's what Clemson needed to get in the playoffs. They're a playoff caliber team. And I think to them to get out of the playoffs, get the championship game, then he's really got to perform at a high level. But he's been doing that, and you just can't say enough good things about the way he has responded. It says a lot about his character because he was getting national criticism. If you remember, it wasn't just local radio and local internet stories and things like that. It was national recognition because he was so highly profiled. But man, you talking about a guy with character to respond the way he has. And Dabo, that's what he said all along. And nobody had a better feel than Dabo because he's the one that spent the most time with him. So he looked like a prophet in that situation.
Tommy Bowden hanging out with us here for a few more minutes on a Friday afternoon as we get set for Clemson and Syracuse tomorrow in Death Valley. So, Coach, when you look at this Clemson team, I've said this, and I don't know when it's got to click. I know that 2016 team went on to win. They went on to win the national title, and they played like 7 games that were decided by 6 points or less, and they didn't really click until, I guess, that 31-0 victory over Ohio State in the Fiesta Bowl in the first round of the playoff. I mean, I haven't seen a unit on this team, Coach, from the quarterback to the secondary. I haven't seen a unit that I would say looks like it's played at a championship level. And I know Coach Sweeney doesn't want to be at a championship level this week, right? He wants that to happen later. Right, exactly. But my goodness, I would think they've played complimentary football, but I haven't seen elite yet. When do you have to start seeing that?
Well, the bad thing about it is they haven't needed elite, but the thing that they've done is they've gotten better. For the most part, they've gotten better every week, and that's what you want to do. And they surely done that. Of course, against Wake Forest, the corners struggle when they're throwing all those deep balls and all that. But there's an injury problem, experience problem. But they've gotten better, and they've gotten better. You want to be playing good football every year, but you also want to get better every week. And if you're getting better every week, obviously you're going to be a better team in game 11 and 12 than you are in game 3 or 4 or 5 or 6. So it looks like Clemson's doing. They are on a really good trajectory right now to be a playoff team, because they won every game. They played some quality competition. They've had their backs against the wall. They've had several elements of how do you make a team happen, and they've been successful. So, like you said, Ohio State was playing at a high level early. Clemson wasn't playing at that high level earlier, but they're getting there. And as long as they reach Ohio State by game 13 or 14, then that's what you want to do. It kind of looks like they're on that trajectory.
Coach, looking at the landscape of college football at this point, there's so many different scenarios out there, and people are talking about, could this be the year that we get 3 SEC teams in? And all the conversations that us radio guys, we like to come up with some wild ones. But I will ask you, just as your father, the incredible success he had at Florida State, age begins to be something that is used against you as a recruiting tool, and Saban, is certainly no spring chicken at this point. The loss to Tennessee, those little things. I mean, how tough is that for him to continue to convince guys and families that, hey, I'm going to be here. I'm going to be here. Because eventually, it caught up to Spurrier. It catches up to every coach.
Oh, yeah. Well, he's at the age now. Is he 71?
I think so. I'll double check while you're talking about it. I'll give you the exact number.
But he's at the stage now where it is going to be used against him. I'll say, well, he's all of a sudden, son, you redshirt, and you got 4 years left. He's not going to be there. What they changed defensive schemes and this and that, and offensive schemes. So he's going to start facing that some. It wouldn't surprise me for Clemson, Ohio State, Georgia to start, finishing ahead of them recruiting. But they stay in the top 10. Alabama the school is a draw anyway, regardless of who the coach is. So they still have that going for them. But the combination of a younger Nick Saban and Alabama and the way they were winning was hard to beat. But he's going to experience that difficulty a little bit, and I'm sure he more than anybody will know that. He'll know that. So it's just something that he's never had to address in his career. But everybody ages, and that's something he's going to have to start addressing himself. In his own personal decisions about coaching and how much longer can he stay at the level. But he set the standard. The standard is so high, what he has set, not only for the others, but for himself. And if he senses that slipping, then I think he's a guy that will go ahead and step to the side. I don't know if we're close to that yet, but I'd say we can see the finish line.
Well, I'll tell you what, I don't know if you and Nick Saban exchanged birthday cards or what, but he turned 71 on Halloween. So he'll be 71 in 10 days.
He won't be trick-or-treating, I can promise you that. He ain't going to go out of that office. And nobody will see him walking down the neighborhood, grandkids.
Oh man, I'll tell you what, he really, you said it best. He's really kind of, set the standard now for this modern, college football world with a playoff that's now expanding. Final thing for you. I said this yesterday. I think around the country at this point, there are about 12 teams that are really still in the mix for the college football playoff. But if you had a 12-team playoff, coach, I'm telling you, there's 30, maybe 35 teams right now that are still vying for a chance to climb into that top 12. And I think that's why they want to expand this thing.
Yeah, and that's a good problem to have. You want that many teams to be competitive for 12 spots. It makes the game more exciting, surely for your fans and your teams. That, man, if we can win out, we just lose one, we can get a 12-team playoff. So it's going to create a lot of excitement for college football, going to 12. But like you said, there's a lot of potential candidates. Now the top guys, Ohio State, Clemson, Georgia, Alabama, they're all Michigan might pop in there, but those four. But those next spots when it becomes a 12-team conference are really going to create a lot of excitement.
Yeah, I mean, so even now, right? Like I think we all wrote off Oregon after the way they were beaten by Georgia in the opener. But if they win tomorrow against UCLA in an interesting game with Chip Kelly returning to take on his old team, I mean, all of a sudden, Oregon's going to start getting a little love towards the top, 7, 8. It'll still take work, but I mean, what a turnaround.
Same thing but what's going to be interesting about 2 more weeks? It's already interesting. That one-loss scenario that you mentioned earlier, that's going to be some great shows because, man, you're looking about, Alabama wins the Western Division and plays an undefeated Georgia and beats Georgia. Tennessee loses one. You got a one-loss Tennessee, a one-loss Alabama, a one-loss Georgia from the SEC. You got a one-loss Clemson or undefeated Clemson or a one-loss UCLA or Oregon. Man, there's going to be some great conversations
Yes,
about
it is. And we'll be right here to talk about it.
We'll,
Coach Tommy Bowden here every Friday on the show that shakes the Southland. Coach, enjoy the rest of your bike ride, and thank you for being a part of the show.
All right, have a good weekend. Thank you.
Tommy Bowden right here on Clemson Sports Talk. 803-450-0086. Text line and phone line again. You can always be a part of the program anytime, any place, and of course, anywhere. When we come back, we'll take a look at the slate of contests coming up. We've given you the rundown on that earlier this week. I'll give you my thoughts on how I think some of these games will play out. Plus, we'll close in on our prediction in this matchup between the Tigers and the Orange. Something about that it just feels natural. Stay with us. Clemson Sports Talk on a Friday afternoon. The Tigers and Syracuse, noon kickoff. Top 15 teams battling. Clemson ranked number 5 in the country. Syracuse number 14. Text line. We were talking about uniforms earlier. Got a couple of texts on this front. HD in Charlotte says all purple would be cool. Purple helmets with an orange paw. I've seen the rendition of those. I will say this. I think purple helmets with purple, all purple uniforms with a purple helmet would be great. I don't know that I'd like the orange paw. I'd go with a white paw. But if I had to lean in heavily, it's still the Icy Whites. HD also says, what in the world was Clemson Tom talking about earlier? Wake is a big test. NC State was a huge test. He said, I'll admit they haven't met their full potential, but Clemson has played ranked opponents, and even FSU was considered a test, he says. All 3 of them were considered tests at the time they played them. That comes to us from HD up in Charlotte. Valid points. I mean, look, I think you look at Clemson's resume. We kind of went through the list the other day of the teams in the top 25. I think this was the stat, right? They're like with losses, there are like 21 losses for the teams in the top 25. And Clemson is the only team in there in the top 25 that has delivered 2 of those losses to programs. And this could potentially give Clemson the 3rd if they win on Saturday against Syracuse. And its team's only ranked in the top 25. So like NC State doesn't even count for Clemson right now because they're outside of that top 25. Sticking with some of the uniform combinations from the text line. Nick over in Georgia says, Swanee, I would love to see Icy Whites with a white helmet and an orange tiger paw. 9-0 in purple jerseys and orange is what Nick said Clemson would be wearing. The Tigers are undefeated when wearing purple and orange. 9-0? I didn't realize that, Nick. Wow. All right, let's take a look here. Billy, talking about the Rudy was offside shirt. He says, I still have that shirt. I bought it from you at Clemson. Yeah, Billy, do you need a re-up? They're fresh and new. Dylan says, Swanee, I've just recently been able to start listening routinely again, and I forgot how fire the interlude music was. Well, thanks, Dylan. I don't get to pick them all. I don't get to pick them all, man. Just some of them. I was talking about the polls yesterday as well. Tiger Chuck said the polls are just here to tick me off. Nothing else. That's probably a fair point, Chuck. You probably look at the polls the way that Bruce Banner handled things.
Don't make me angry. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry.
Dun, 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 dun. Yeah. Yeah. All right, man. We got to get into this matchup with Syracuse and Clemson. Obviously, we got our predictions coming up. We will re-rack and run the full audio of this show along with the simulation tonight as well. Busy night for me, as it'll be an early start tomorrow. By the way, our overnight sensation brought to you by the Shepherd Hotel in downtown Clemson this week was Antonio Williams, the freshman prospect from right here in the Midlands with 2 receptions in the game, 59-yard touchdown, though, to tie things up. But this season, he's got 24 catches for 334 yards in 6 ball games. And those 24 catches are a team high. And if you think about the emergence that could come for a guy like Adam Randall, we talk about wide receiver U, man. It does seem like the youth at Clemson right now at wide receiver have a real chance over the next couple of weeks to start to showcase themselves around the country. And I'm here for it. I like it when young players start making plays. I mean, that was what was special about Trevor. That's what was special about Travis Etienne. That's what was special about Justin Ross, Sammy Watkins. When young players start making plays, it's like, ooh, this program's got, they got some weapons. They've got some real weapons. Shifting gears real quick, last night, Tony Elliott and the Virginia Cavaliers knocked off Georgia Tech on the road 16-9. You also had Troy beating South Alabama 10-6. Tonight, a couple of ball games. Tulsa's at Temple at 7:30 on ESPN2, and UAB's at Western Kentucky at 8 o'clock on CBS. Gave you the rundown of the big games tomorrow. One game of interest, I think, just for point of emphasis here. Ohio State and Iowa. Now, I know what you're thinking. I know what you're thinking. There's no chance, there's not a snowball's chance in a microwave, Swanee, that Iowa beats Ohio State. And I tend to agree with you. But the last time these two teams faced off, the Hawkeyes won 55-24 in 2017. 55-24 over an Urban Meyer coached Ohio State team. Now, I'm not telling you that happens tomorrow, because the Hawkeyes are 3-3. They are awful on offense. And they put the off in awful. They scored 7 points in a win over South Dakota State. They scored 7 points in a loss to Iowa State, 10-7. They scored 27 against Nevada, 27 against Rutgers, 14 against Michigan, and 6 against Illinois. Like if they muster 2 touchdowns, it might be a Christmas miracle. But defensively, they're tough. So can they put the brakes on the fast break Buckeye offense and make this a game? I don't think so. But will they get beat by the 30-plus points that Ohio State's favored by? I don't know that they will. Wouldn't it be interesting if Iowa can make the Buckeyes sweat? Stay with us. Clemson Sports Talk on Fox Sports Radio 1400, the iHeartRadio app, our website, clemsonsportstalk.com. So I just look, 9.8 points per game is what Iowa gives up. Ohio State scores 48.8. As the late, great Gorilla Monsoon might say, the irresistible force meets the immovable object. I don't think Iowa's going to win this game, okay? My question becomes, though, more than anything else, can they keep this game competitive? And if they can, and there starts to be like pressure on Ohio State, could it go against the Buckeyes? Yeah, it absolutely could. Absolutely could. And I don't think it will. I think Ohio State wins this thing by like 21 points. Maybe 24, but I don't think they push that thing over 30. I'll be honest with you. I don't. Other matchups around the country, Clemson, obviously Syracuse at noon. Ole Miss at LSU, 3:30 on CBS. We touched on this game earlier this week. The most interesting nugget out of this continues to be the fact that LSU is favored. LSU at 5-2, 3-1 in the SEC. Ole Miss 7-0. Ole Miss averages nearly 41 points per game, giving up just 17. You know, I like Lane Kiffin. I like his play calling ability. And I watched that LSU Florida State game. I don't really like what, and I know that was very early in the season for LSU. Jaden Daniels at quarterback has only got 1 interception this season with 1,500 yards passing, so he's been very efficient. I would think the only reason this is LSU being favored more than anything is simply because it's a home game for the Bayou Bengals. But I like Ole Miss. I do. I like Lane Kiffin, his play calling. I think he gets it done. He's a great in-game coach. Great in-game coach. Then you got UCLA at Oregon. Oregon sitting there, the top 10-ish. Their lone loss coming to the top team in the country, the Georgia Bulldogs, by a wide margin. But they become an interesting story if they win tomorrow. Maybe not as interesting as an undefeated UCLA at this point. More on that in a minute. But if Oregon wins tomorrow, 3:30 on Fox against UCLA, they have remaining games against California, maybe one of the worst teams in college football, Colorado, Washington, Utah, and then Oregon State. It's conceivable that the Oregon Ducks could run the table into the Pac-12 championship game and be this weird outlier that's not been beaten since they were hammered in the opener by Georgia. And would that be enough for them to get in if they're the Pac-12 champs? Could they get into the college football playoff? As for UCLA, the Bruins feel like a team at this point kind of riding a bit of a, riding kind of in a cloud, if you will, and could be humbled pretty quickly. But Chip Kelly versus his old school, if they get a win against Oregon, Stanford, very beatable. Arizona State, very beatable. Arizona, very beatable. Southern Cal, the hurdle, and then California, very beatable. UCLA has a schedule remaining where Southern Cal is perhaps the only hiccup. I mean, all honesty here, all honesty, the Pac-12 has basically been on the outside of the college football playoff since Washington's visit back in 2016, 2017, when Clemson went on to win the national title over Alabama. The Crimson Tide took on Washington in the Peach Bowl and won that game 24-7. Since then, the teams that have been in the playoff, Alabama, Clemson, Georgia, Oklahoma, Notre Dame, LSU, Ohio State, Cincinnati, and Michigan. No Pac-12 teams. But this year, with those two teams where they are, it's shaping up that one of those two could potentially climb into the conversation by the year's end. And on top of that, UCLA, if they could get in, the championship game is being played in Inglewood at SoFi Stadium in their backyard. Essentially a home game if UCLA could get into the College Football Playoff National Championship. And in most seasons, I would probably pick Oregon to win this game. And it's tough for me not to be honest with you, because Oregon's the home team, the Chip Kelly storyline. Like, it's hard not to pick Oregon. But if you told me I had to choose between Dorian Thompson-Robinson, DTR over there at UCLA versus Bo Nix, I just feel like Bo Nix is the one more likely to make mistakes tomorrow. And when you make mistakes in a game like this, you get beat. And so with that coaching edge to Brian Kelly as well, I think UCLA is going to pull this off. And I can't believe, like, if you had told me that I was going to say this at the beginning of the year, I'd have told you all bull butter. That's not going to happen. I think UCLA, after looking at this game closer, pulls off the victory tomorrow. By the way, the spread is Oregon -6.5 and a 71.5% matchup prediction winner for the Ducks. The Ducks defensively may be better, but I don't like Bo Nix in a game like this in a sport that's driven by quarterback play. Final segment coming up. We'll give you our prediction on Clemson and Syracuse next.
What have you done for me lately? It's a fair question. Just don't lose sight of the bigger picture. Don't forget history. Lucky for us at Clemson, the answer to the questions, what have you done for me lately, and what have you done always, are the same. We win.
Final segment of the week on a Friday. The Tigers and the Orange tomorrow. Death Valley facing off Clemson. Spreads moved up to about 14 now. It was 13.5, I think, when we started the show. So it's expanded a little bit. And, look, I go back to my statements earlier about DTR and Bo Nix and that matchup with UCLA and Oregon. DJ's the better quarterback. DJ's the better prospect than Schrader. And when push comes to shove in Death Valley tomorrow, Clemson's tremendous weight advantage up front on the offensive line should help. Should be a big day on the ground for both Will Shipley and Phil Maffa. Call them the Fresh Prince, Will and Phil. If you don't get that reference, this is a story all about how my life got flipped, turned upside down. I'm just saying. You should go research it and get that reference. You see what I did there? But DJ, Jazzy Jeff, oh, baby, yes, DJ Uyunglele. 17 touchdowns offset by just 2 interceptions this season. The rushing yards, his ability to make plays in the pocket, pull the ball down. Make no mistake about it. This is the DJ that you thought you were going to see a year ago. And I still think he's about 2 or 3 rungs lower than what you thought he was going to be. But if he starts to play at that next level up and then another level up, you know, I've talked about elite. DJ has not been elite. He's been really good, great at times, not elite. These Clemson position groups over the next 2, 3, 4 games are going to have to start looking the part. You don't all have to be elite today, but I need to start to see elite. I want to start to see things where you felt like every time, say, Travis Etienne got the ball, you felt like it could be a home run. House call. You don't see that from Will Shipley every time. I want to start seeing that. Every time Trevor Lawrence dropped back to pass, you thought, oh man, this could be 6. I need to see that. Every time the opponent took a snap, you thought it could be a sack. I need to see that. Every pass was contested defensively. Could be a pick 6. I want to see that. Speaking of pick 6s, by the way, Isaiah Simmons last night in the NFL with a pick 6. Good for him. Love Isaiah Simmons. Second favorite pick 6 of his career, though, for me. That he was involved in, at least. Number 1 will always be A.J. Terrell, and then Simmons in the background. So, Simmons, you can have 100 pick 6s in your NFL career. It will always finish second to one you were involved in where you batted the ball. And A.J. Terrell, shockingly, Clemson stunned Alabama by a wide margin. As a matter of fact, as we're watching that Tennessee-Alabama game this past weekend, and Tennessee was up big, they're talking about, the last time Alabama was beaten like this was 2019 LSU, and it didn't end that way. And I'll go ahead and tell you, the time I saw Clemson kicking Alabama's rear end around Santa Clara, California, will never leave my mind. As for this game, I think Clemson's offensive line strength here for the Tigers, size advantage, controls it. They will be able to do what they want offensively. I think that's going to be big for Clemson. I do think the Tigers end up covering this 14-point spread, and I don't think it's going to be that close. Syracuse has yet to be tested. As I said earlier, I was asked by Mark Ryan on his show yesterday about ranking teams in the ACC, the top 5 teams, and I didn't have Syracuse in my top 5. I don't think they are in the top 5 of this league. I think that their matchups with Louisville, UConn, Purdue, Virginia, and Wagner, along with a victory last week over NC State without Devin Leary, to me don't hold a lot of water. They're about to hit Clemson, Notre Dame, Pitt, Florida State, and Wake Forest. They could literally go from 6-0 to 6-5 that quick. I mean, it could happen that quick. And I do think that first loss for Syracuse happens this weekend. And I think Clemson gets the job done. And I don't think the Tigers look elite, but I think they put up an elite victory. I'm going to take Clemson pretty big here. I think the Tigers beat Syracuse tomorrow in Death Valley by a score of 43-13. I think it's a 30-point win by your Clemson Tigers. Certainly leaning in on some field goals from Syracuse. I'm not sure how Clemson will find their way to 43. But 42 just, to me, feels a little under the number. So I'll go 43-13 Clemson with a 30-point win at home, covering easily the 14-point spread. Now, could this game end up being one where Syracuse punches in a couple of late touchdowns a la Florida State? Yes. Do I think you're going to be sweating into the fourth quarter? No. I think Clemson's going to put this thing away. I think Clemson's that much better than Syracuse. But we'll find out. Will they play that much better than Syracuse? We won't know until tomorrow at noon. Check out those Rudy Was Offside t-shirts on our website all weekend long until Monday. As always, y'all take care now. And go Tigers!